Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we explore some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're heading to Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia, where a man was found dead in 1948 with no ID and labels cut from his clothes. Police found a small scrap of paper with the words Tamám Shud in a hidden pocket of his clothing. It was torn from a copy of the Persian poetry book Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám. Although the phrase means "it is finished," for investigators, the mystery was just beginning. Somerton Beach sits along a calm stretch of coastline in South Australia. On the morning of December 1st, 1948, a couple discovered something unsettling near the seawall. A well-dressed man was lying back in the sand with his head against the wall, his legs extended and his feet crossed. At first glance, he looked like someone who had fallen asleep by the water after a long night out. Police were contacted around 6:30 a.m., and when officers arrived, they found the man dead. The scene raised questions almost immediately. There was no obvious sign of a struggle. No wallet, no identification, no personal letters. And in a detail that has become one of the most famous aspects of the case, the labels had been removed from his clothing. That doesn't prove a conspiracy by itself, but it does suggest intent. Someone wanted to make it harder to trace the clothing back to a shop, a manufacturer, or a person. With no ID, the stranger soon became known in Australian newspapers as the Somerton Man. Witnesses soon added an eerie layer to the timeline. Multiple people reported seeing a man in that same spot the previous evening, November 30th, lying in a similar position. One couple said they saw him extend his right arm and then drop it limply. Others recalled noticing mosquitoes and thinking it was strange that he didn't seem to react, but they assumed he was asleep or intoxicated and didn't intervene. Those small details later became unforgettable, the final movements of someone who may have been dying in public, unnoticed. When police searched the man's pockets, they found a collection of items that seemed ordinary at first, but later became vital to the investigation. There was an unused second-class rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a bus ticket that may not have been used, a comb manufactured in the United States, juicy fruit chewing gum, an Army Club cigarette packet containing cigarettes of a different brand, and a box of Bryant and May matches. There was also a half-smoked cigarette on the right lapel area of his coat. None of it identified him, but all of it hinted that this man had been traveling, or at least moving through the city, shortly before his death. Physically, the unknown man's body appeared to be in good condition. Contemporary reporting and later summaries described him as well-built, with some observers noting prominent calf muscles, a detail that has inspired speculation about whether he danced, ran, or was especially active. But speculation isn't evidence, and the case would be shaped far more by what investigators could not find than by what they could. The autopsy created one of the central controversies of the entire story. The doctor who performed it believed the death could be consistent with poisoning, yet no specific poison was identified. Although it was not definitively determined that he was poisoned, it was strongly suspected by the pathologist, and the coroner did not rule out foul play. With no name and no clear cause of death, police broadened their search. One of the most significant developments involved a suitcase left at the Adelaide railway station. Investigators linked luggage to the case and cataloged clothing and other items inside. Once again, they ran into the same unnerving detail. Identifying marks had been removed. The broader theme repeated itself. Anonymity seemed engineered rather than accidental. For weeks, the public was drawn into the mystery. Police released photographs, hoping someone would recognize the man. No one did. No missing person report clearly matched. The case simmered, unresolved. That is, until a discovery months later turned it into legend. In January 1949, investigators found something that had been missed earlier. A tiny hidden fob pocket sewn into the waistband area of the man's trousers. Inside was a small, tightly rolled piece of paper. On it were printed two words, Tamám Shud. The phrase is Persian, and it's famously printed at the end of certain versions of the Persian poetry book, the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám. The words translate roughly to, "It has ended," or "It is finished." The implication was immediate and dramatic. This didn't look like a random scrap of paper. It looked like a message, a deliberate punctuation mark at the end of a life. South Australia Police launched a public appeal for the source book, the exact edition from which the scrap had been torn. Eventually, a man came forward with a copy of the Rubáiyát that he said had been left in his car. Investigators concluded that the paper had been torn from the final page of that very book. When police examined it, they found two more bombshells inside, a series of apparently random letters arranged in 5 lines that appeared to form some kind of code, as well as an unlisted telephone number. The code has been one of the most enduring rabbit holes in the case. Over the years, people have proposed everything from military ciphers to shorthand mnemonic systems, to acrostics, to meaningless scribbling. What's safe to say is that it has never been conclusively decoded in a way that is universally accepted and verifiable. The code remains an unresolved artifact, tantalizing, famous, and stubbornly opaque. The phone number, on the other hand, led somewhere real. Police traced it to Jessica Harkness, later known as Jessica Thompson, a young nurse living in Glenelg, very close to Somerton Beach. Because authorities wished to protect her identity, she was later referred to in press accounts by the pseudonym Jestin. She had once owned a copy of the Rubáiyát, but years earlier she had given the book to an Australian Army officer named Alfred Boxall, writing a verse inside and signing it Jestin. When detectives interviewed Jessica in July of 1949, they showed her a plaster death mask that police had made from the unidentified man's face after his autopsy. According to police reports and later accounts from the detectives present, she appeared visibly shocked when she saw the mask, with one officer reporting that she seemed completely taken aback. Another account states she looked as if she might faint and had to compose herself before continuing the interview. Despite this reaction, Jessica insisted she did not know the man and had never seen him before. Police officially accepted her statement and did not publicly accuse her of withholding information, but several investigators later suggested that her reaction seemed unusually strong if the man had truly been a stranger. This moment has since become one of the most frequently cited reasons why researchers suspect she may have recognized the Somerton man, but chose not to say so for some reason. At the time of the police interview, Jessica was living with Prosper Thompson, the man who would later become her husband, and the telephone number in the book was associated with their household rather than exclusively with her. Although the discovery created one of the most tantalizing connections in the case, she was never conclusively linked to the mysterious man whose body was found at Somerton Beach. From there, the case split into competing interpretations. One path saw the Somerton man as a victim of covert activity, espionage, intelligence work, something Cold War adjacent. The other saw him as a man caught in a private tragedy, a broken relationship, depression, or a life unraveling quietly. The evidence could be read in either direction, which is one reason why the case has survived for so long. In the late 1940s, Australia was part of a world reshuffling into new alliances and fears. Spy stories were in the air, and they tended to attach themselves to mysteries like this one, especially when you have missing identification, removed labels, a possible poison, and an apparent cipher. Those ingredients don't prove espionage, but they do explain why the theory took hold and why it never really went away. Another haunting question revolves around the true meaning of the words Tamám Shud in this case. If the scrap of paper was intentionally placed in his pocket, it could be interpreted as a symbolic farewell. But keep in mind that we don't know who placed it there, and we don't know when. The paper was found months later in a hidden pocket, which complicates any simple narrative. More than 7 decades later, in May 2021, South Australia police exhumed the Somerton man's remains from Adelaide's West Terrace Cemetery in cooperation with the coroner. They hope that modern DNA analysis techniques might finally reveal his identity. That moment marked a major shift. After many years of speculation, the case had a chance to move from myth to measurable biology. Yet despite their efforts, the actual breakthrough came from an unexpected place. In July 2022, an announcement came that made global headlines. University of Adelaide professor Derek Abbott, working with forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick of Identifiers International, were able to extract DNA from several strands of hair preserved on the plaster death mask. They built a family tree of over 4,000 people from distant DNA matches found through genetic genealogy databases. On July 23rd, a closer DNA comparison with a distant cousin produced a result that Abbott believed left virtually no doubt about the man's identity. He believed the probability of the match being correct was about 99.9%. 3 days later, on July 26th, Abbott and Fitzpatrick publicly revealed their findings, namely that the mysterious man found dead on Somerton Beach in 1948 was almost certainly Carl Webb, an electrical engineer who was born in Melbourne in 1905. The following day, authorities issued a statement that said in part, South Australia police are aware of the results published by Professor Derek Abbott regarding the possible identification of the Somerton man. The investigation remains ongoing, and police are working with forensic experts to independently verify the DNA results. Today, nearly 4 years later, the identification has still not been formally confirmed by the police. If the Somerton man was indeed Carl Webb, subsequent research into the circumstances of his life may help explain how such a mystery could have unfolded. It turns out that Webb had married a woman named Dorothy Robertson in 1941, but their marriage appears to have deteriorated quickly. By 1946, the couple had separated, and Dorothy later described her husband as a quiet, withdrawn man who preferred solitude and kept largely to himself. After leaving the marriage, Webb seems to have drifted away from family and friends. In a time long before digital records or constant communication, a man living on the margins could disappear surprisingly easily. That relative isolation may help explain how a man could die on an Australian beach in 1948 without anyone coming forward to claim him. One reason why this case has endured over the years is that it offers two kinds of mystery at once. There's the forensic mystery, the body, the timeline, the physical evidence, and there's the human mystery, relationships, secrets, decisions, and motivations we can't measure with DNA. In a sense, that's what makes the Somerton man so haunting. The closer we get to his identity, the more we realize that identity alone doesn't explain the final act. Maybe Tamám Shud really was meant as a curtain falling. Maybe it was a message from someone else. Maybe it was a clue left deliberately. Or maybe it was a strange coincidence that became a legend because investigators had so little else to hold on to. Whatever the truth is, the Somerton Man remains one of the rare cases where a single scrap of paper can carry the weight of an entire mythology. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, even when a name is finally found, a mystery can still refuse to let go.